Well, good morning. We're so glad to be here with you. My name is Jeni, but I know that not all of you are part of Celebrate Recovery, but I need to feel like I'm in Celebrate Recovery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce myself the way we do in Celebrate Recovery, and all you have to do is say, "Hi, Jeni," when I'm done. Okay, does that work? All right, so hey, everybody, my name is Jeni. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with alcoholism and codependency. Your turn. All right, great.
Hey guys, my name is Jeni, and I'm a grateful believer. I struggle with codependency, and I'm an adult child of family dysfunction.
All right, we'll see you guys all Thursday night. Perfect. Our job is done. You're now a part of Celebrate Recovery. We are so glad to be here with you and really excited about this weekend. We're going to be back tonight and tomorrow as well. So if you can come and be a part of that, we'd love for you to be there. But what we want to do is we want to help break a myth around Celebrate Recovery. And that myth is that Celebrate Recovery is just for people who struggle with drug addiction or alcoholism. Now, thank goodness, Celebrate Recovery is for those of us who have what we call chemical addiction issues, but actually only about a third of the people who attend Celebrate Recovery, this is worldwide by the way, come for drug or alcohol addiction. Everybody else comes from a wide variety of what we call hurts, hang-ups, and habits. When the program was first started in 1991 by my parents, John and Cheryl Baker, by the way, I was 15 years old. I was invited to come to the first few meetings because I was, like I said, 15, and they didn't want to leave me home alone on Friday nights because they were smart and they didn't want their house to be burned down. And so I got to come on Friday nights for about a year. Something happened when I turned 16. I got my driver's license, and all of a sudden I didn't need to be there anymore. But thankfully, I had the foundation of walking through the steps and principles as a teenager. It's why I love that video so much of Skylar, of the foundation that is set for us. Because later on, after I had walked out on my own and started to build my own testimony and struggled with alcoholism myself, I had a place to go. I knew right where to go. But like I said, so many people think that recovery is just for people with drug addiction or alcoholism. What I want to do today, what we want to do is to try to help you see that you qualify for Celebrate Recovery. We would love for you to find the healing and the freedom that we have found, because it's not just about addiction issues, it's about hurts, hang-ups, and habits.
What I love about Celebrate Recovery is that we're not just about foundational healing. We're not about behavior modification or just stopping behaviors. Traditionally, I think recovery can be all about our habits. And I think a lot of people start attending recovery because they have an unhealthy habit or a behavior in their life that is making it feel unmanageable. And usually this is an identifiable behavior like an addiction or compulsive habits or codependent behaviors like manipulation, control, or enabling. But another common reason that people are getting into recovery is because of the hurt in their lives. And I fall into that group. And what I mean by that is that when I got into recovery, I was more aware of how I was hurt than I was of how I was behaving. I was more aware of the pain that I was feeling rather than the unhealthy habits that I was doing. And whether we come more aware of our behavior and our habits or more aware of the hurt and the pain that we are in, we all come wanting the same thing. We all come wanting that pain in our life to stop. And I think the stigma around recovery is that if we can just stop behaviors, then the pain will stop. If I can just stop drinking, then the pain will stop. If I can just stop gambling, the pain will stop. If I can just stop spending, or if I can just stop looking at pornography, then the pain will stop. But our end goal here at Celebrate Recovery is not just sobriety and stopping behaviors. The real goal is finding that freedom and that healing through the power of a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, sobriety is necessary and it's great, especially for certain areas of recovery. I'm not saying that we don't need sobriety. I'm just saying that we want so much more than sobriety. We want healing and we want freedom. Hebrews 12:1 tells us, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us." Now, according to this verse, we're to throw off all that hinders us and the sin that entangles us. And the sin, that's easy. That's our habits and our behaviors. But I think this verse is referring to our hurts and our hang-ups too, because our unaddressed and unhealed hurts and hang-ups, they can hinder us. They can hold us back. And we want to run this race that God has marked out for us as unhindered by our hurts and our hang-ups and as unentangled by our sin as possible. That is the freedom and the healing that we're after. Not just getting rid of the sin, not just stopping those habits in our lives. This is so important to go after the hurts and the hang-ups too, because the current struggles that we are dealing with, they are directly tied to the pain and the trauma and the wounds of our past. Realizing that our habits, that they stem from the pain of our past, it destigmatizes the struggles that we're dealing with. It takes away this thought or this belief that the struggle that I'm dealing with, I'm only struggling with it because I'm a bad person. It takes that away. Looking at ourselves and our experiences holistically, it helps us understand ourselves better. And ultimately, it makes it easier to accept God's grace and his forgiveness and to fully receive his love. So when we want that healing, we need to go after all three. We need to go after our hurts, our hang-ups, and our habits.
Yeah, and we'll start with hurts. Now, it's not like we only have one or the other. We all have hurts, hang-ups, and many of us have habits, but it all starts with hurt. And so much of our life, hurt is unaddressed. We do so much to push it away and not deal with it. And sometimes we like to believe that, well, I know other people have been hurt, but I'm good. I haven't been hurt. Well, there's a verse in the Bible that in the book of Romans, chapter 3, Paul says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Now, I can't claim to be a Bible scholar. I don't know Greek and Hebrew and all those things, but I did look up the word all. And what Paul means in this verse with that word is all, everybody, right? There's nobody who doesn't count in this segment. That means that all of us have sinned. All of us have hurt ourselves with our own sin and other people with our sin, and all of us have been hurt by other people's sin. See, sin doesn't just separate us from God, it also separates us from other people. It's when we sin, we hurt ourselves and other people. All of us, if we were honest, would admit that we have been hurt. Now, we don't like to look at our hurt, and don't worry, I'm not going to make anybody stand up and tell us your deepest, darkest pain or anything like that. But the reality is that we have all been hurt. And because Celebrate Your Recovery is for anyone who has been hurt or has hurt other people, we really do. We want to invite you to come check out Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah. Now, the word hurt, I think it's a comfortable, familiar word for most of us. But I think the word trauma can be a little bit different. Some of you may have even had a reaction when I use the word trauma. Some of you may identify with it. Some may push against it or think that it's an overused word. Or we're probably all working off of different definitions of the word trauma, most likely. So a simple definition of trauma that I have found really helpful is that trauma is anything that has changed your belief about yourself, others, or God for the worse. Again, anything that has happened that has changed your belief about yourself, others, or God for the worse. Now, when it comes to trauma, there are different types. I think there are those things that a lot of people think are traumatic events: abuse, death of a loved one, a near-death experience, crisis, natural disaster, or a physical neglect. This also can include what we call adverse childhood experiences, such as parents' divorce, living with a parent, a sibling, or a caretaker who struggles with mental illness or struggles with an addiction, or experiencing or witnessing violence. But I also want to talk about something called developmental traumas. Now, developmental traumas, rather than what did happen to us, developmental traumas are a result of what didn't happen for us as children. So this can look like emotional neglect, not having a parent or a caregiver who was able to be there for you emotionally, or growing up too fast and taking on responsibilities that a child shouldn't have to take on, which is called parentification, or growing up in an unreliable and an unstable home that felt chaotic and felt unsafe. Now, I think these developmental traumas, they can be more subtle, they can be unseen, and they can feel a lot harder to prove. And it may feel weird to even acknowledge these as traumas. But I just want to say, just because you weren't beaten, violated, or abused doesn't mean you didn't experience trauma. So why am I talking about trauma? Well, for a couple of reasons. First, because when we are after healing in our recovery journey, and in order to do that, we have to know what we need to heal from. but mostly because the trend that I have seen in my 13 years of recovery, and this definitely applies to my own life, is that most of us have never been able to call it what it is. We've never been able to name it. Instead, we were taught to downplay it, and some of us were told explicitly to deny that it ever happened. Or we were shamed if we brought it up, told that we shouldn't feel that way about it, that maybe we were being weak or dramatic for feeling a certain way about it. But acknowledging our pain, and for some of us, our trauma, it is so important because knowing our history, knowing what happened to us, helps us to understand why we believe certain things that we believe and why we struggle with certain things that we struggle with.
So to make it personal, my question to you, if we were able to sit down, is to say, what hurt have you experienced? What have you gone through? See, so often we try to push our hurt away and we compare it to other people, or we say it wasn't that bad, or everybody's gone through it. And as we talk about these things, some of you might even have a reflex of like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to blame any bad decision someone's made on the fact that they were hurt. No, we're not trying to blame. We're trying to explain. See, many of us, we don't know why we do the things that we do because we don't take the time to be introspective or to ask God to search us and to point out things. And we're reacting from wounds that were maybe decades ago. But even as we talk about this pain, it's not as though we stop getting hurt once we're adults. Wouldn't that be great? Some of the pain you might have experienced may be more recent. And it may still be traumatic. And if undealt with, pain doesn't just get better on its own. It doesn't heal on its own. It needs someone to come in and give us healing, and that's why we bring our pain to Jesus. Not so we can say, oh, it's not my fault that I do bad things, but so we can say, oh, I was wounded and I'm operating out of those wounds. Because like I said, pain left alone doesn't just heal on its own, it gets worse, and it turns into something that we call hang-ups. Now, tonight, we're going to be back at the evening service, and we're really going to dig into hang-ups, which basically we're going to spend the whole time on, because what we have learned is that it's unidentified hang-ups that many of us walk around with that affect our lives because we act out of what we think is true about us. And hang-ups, a simple definition for a hang-up is a belief system that we have about ourselves, other people, or God, or maybe even our place in the world or the world in general that isn't true, but we operate as though it is. It's something that we believe about ourselves or other people, or like I said, about God, and it's a lie. But we don't know that it's a lie because we've lived with it for so long. And you've got a couple hang-ups that are common. Not you personally. You have a list of them.
I do. I struggle with quite a bit of these.
I almost got in a lot of trouble.
No. You've heard me talk enough. Even though we're going to dig into it more tonight, I do want to give you guys a list of some common hang-ups or belief systems that we all tend to struggle with. I'm a burden. My emotions make me a burden. My needs make me a burden. I'm different. Something is wrong with me. To be loved, I need to be perfect. I'm not capable. I can't trust myself. I'm not good enough. To be safe, I must be invisible or unnoticed by others. I can't trust anyone. I am responsible for the happiness of others. If I don't help that person, then they won't be okay. My emotion makes me irrational. I have to do it myself because no one is going to help me. I'm not worth it. I'm fundamentally unlovable, or I'm broken. Now, these beliefs, they develop out of the pain and the wounds of the trauma of our past. And these beliefs, these hang-ups, they end up driving our behaviors and our habits. Our habits, and more specifically our unhealthy habits, they are often the outward symptoms of our inward pain. Dr. Diane Langberg says it this way. She said, the wounds of trauma are not visible, but the effects are. And our unhealthy habits, they are the effects of our pain. So our hurts, they deal with our heart and how we're feeling. Our hang-ups, they deal with our head and what we're thinking and what we're believing. And our habits deal with our actions. So it starts in our heart, and then it goes to our head, and then it comes out in our hands. And to get that true healing, that freedom that we all want, we have to deal with all three: our hurts, our hang-ups, and our habits. Now, even though I said in the beginning that it was my hurt that had brought me into recovery, I quickly realized that my struggles and my behaviors have a name, which is codependency. And then as I began to address the pain and the wounds from my childhood, I realized that I was beginning to understand my struggle with these codependent behaviors more and more. And I discovered that childhood hurt is most often the root of codependency. See, these codependent behaviors that I struggle with, they all formed as survival techniques in my childhood. These behaviors, they were necessary for me to feel safe growing up in a dysfunctional home. So what began as necessary and needed in my childhood quickly became unhealthy in my adulthood. It's like putting on armor. We all experiencing these varying degrees of pain and disappointment and trauma and hard stuff in our life. And then these behaviors that we develop to survive, we put them on like armor to protect ourselves. And the armor was necessary when we were younger. But as adults, this armor that we wear, it keeps us from being fully known and fully seen by others. The armor, it no longer serves us. In fact, the very thing that we put on to protect ourselves now begins to hurt us. And it keeps us from running this race that God has marked out for us as unhindered and as untangled as possible. So how do we heal? How do we find this recovery that we want? We need to start laying down and taking off the armor. We look back at our childhood and we address the unhealed pain and trauma and the wounds there and the hard stuff. And we need to go back to look. We need to look and understand why we put that armor on in the first place. And this helps us to understand why we struggle with the things that we believe and the behaviors that we struggle with. To get that true healing that we all want, we need to start with the heart. We need to start with the hurt, because the hurt is the foundation of these habits that we struggle with.
Yeah, like Jeni said, as she began recovery for some of her hurt, I started coming to recovery for real because of my habit. And I came because I wanted to stop my behavior. Maybe like me, you have something in your life that's out of control. It feels unmanageable. And maybe even you've asked God to take it from you or to help you stop, but you keep coming back to it over and over and over again. I love the Bible because it's so raw and honest. And Paul in the book of Romans chapter 7 says, I don't even understand myself at all. For the good I know I should do, I don't want to do. The bad that I know I shouldn't do, that I want to do. And I keep on doing. And he said, what a wretched man I am. Who can save me? And then in Romans 8, he says, thank goodness for Jesus Christ, because there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And so maybe like Paul, maybe like me, there's something in your life. And if we were to put it up on this screen, you'd be embarrassed because people would all of a sudden find out that you've been carrying a habit with you. You're keeping it quiet. Nobody knows, but it's running or ruining your life. See, I came to recovery because of my desire and my need to stop drinking, but it's not what's kept me there. What's kept me there is that God has revealed hang-ups in my life. He's revealed lies that I've believed my entire life about myself, about other people, about him. Things that sounded so true because I'd heard them so often and I'd heard them in my own internal voice that I believed them. And then he's revealed hurts as foundations, because when I came to recovery, because I knew I'd hurt so many people, I didn't even look at how I'd been hurt. In fact, I didn't even think I had been hurt. And it wasn't until years later that God was able to so lovingly, like a loving father, say, hey, I'm ready to take you another step deeper. I'm ready to take you to the next level. And so no matter what's going on with you today, whether you have a hurt, maybe it's recent, maybe it's decades old, and that hurt is keeping you stuck. Or maybe you have a hang-up, a belief system, and even right now you're wondering, I don't know, maybe it's not. Maybe I really am a burden. Maybe I really am unlovable. Maybe everybody else, it's not true, but for me, it's true. I want to remind you, you have an enemy who would love for you to stay there. Or maybe you have a habit, something out of control, something you wish you could stop doing. See, the power of Celebrate Recovery, it's not in the steps. It's not in the groups. It's not in our workbooks. The power of Celebrate Recovery is in the fact that we bring it all to Jesus Christ. That he is the one who says, let me heal your pain. He is the one that says, let me change the lie you believed with the truth I say about you. And he's the one that says that habit that you can't break on your own power, I overcame death in the grave. I defeated sin. How about you let me try it on for a while and see if my power is big enough? And I will tell you it is. So as we close, what I would love for us to do is if every head would bow, every eye would close. I'm going to ask you to pray a prayer just silently in your heart that we see in the book of Psalms that David prayed, where he said, search my heart, O God, test my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me on the path everlasting. And as we pray, ask God to search you and ask him to see if there's a hurt that he's saying, child, I'm ready to heal you. You've been carrying that for so long. Give it to me. Ask him if there's a belief you have that's not true, that's keeping you stuck and keeping you from walking the life that he has set out before you. And he says, let me exchange my truth for the lie you've believed. And maybe there's a habit. Ask him for the power to help you overcome that habit.